In this video, we'll look into all the essential tools that Affinity offers under the Pixel Studio mode. So, before starting, first of all, make sure that you are in Pixel Studio. So, Pixel Studio is just like Photoshop, where it offers different tools to edit and manipulate images. So, the first tool that we have is the Move tool, which is this tool right here. So, what Move tool does is it basically allows us to move an image. It allows us to resize an image, or it allows us to rotate an image. We can click on top of a corner point and then rotate the image like so. We can also hold down the shift key to apply the constraints so that we can geometrically rotate it or move it geometrically like this. After the move tool, the next tool is the perspective tool. So this one here is the perspective tool. So what the perspective tool allows us to do is it allows us to change the perspective of an image. We can simply click on a corner point and then move the point around to change the perspective of an image like so. You can notice that perspective tool also has provided us with a box at the bottom right corner, which allows us to show the grid, adjust the opacity, blend modes, and adjust other settings like modes, etc. However, we will close the live perspective box for now and then undo the image. So as you can see here on the layers panel that after implementing the perspective tool, it has by default created a new perspective mask. So I'll go ahead and remove the perspective mask for now and move on to the next tool. So our next tool is the mesh warp tool. Okay, so first of all, let's select the layer. And our next tool is the mesh warp tool. So what the mesh warp tool allows us to do is it allows us to warp an image as per our preference. We can also adjust the anchor points and we can make the adjustments and warp the image entirely like so, as you can see here. Okay, so this is what a mesh warp tool does. It allows us to warp an image. And for now, I'll not be implementing this, so I'll click on reset and it has reset our image back. So the next tool that we have is the deform tool. So what this deform tool does is it allows us to deform an image. So let me go ahead and click on deform tool or select deform tool. So it allows to deform image by setting a point here, and we can click again at the other end, and then we can simply click and drag to deform an image like so. And please notice that we can set a pair of points to deform. We can set a next point and then we can deform. And we can set a next point and deform. And we can deform our image like so. However, I'll reset the image again by clicking on cancel. And now it has resetted our image back again. The next tool that we have is the crop tool. The crop tool is very much similar to other apps like Photoshop, where we can crop the image. We can simply adjust its dimensions of the crop that we require. We can hold down the command to adjust the size vertically, and we can also use other size template here, which is golden spiral, diagonals, or phi grid. And these are the grids actually for the crop. However, I'll set to none for now, and I can simply adjust the size like so, and then again apply the crop to the image. So it has cropped the image a bit. So the next tool that we have is the object selection tool. Before applying the object selection tool, what you must ensure is you must install a machine learning model first. As I've already installed the machine learning model, I do not have to reinstall it. However, I'll show you how to do it. Go to Affinity on the top left and go to settings. If you're on the Windows, it's preference. And on here, you can see that there is machine learning models. So in machine learning models, you can see this particular section called segmentation. In segmentation, As I've already installed the segmentation model, I do not need to install it again. However, if you are installing your Affinity recently, then you need to install the segmentation model. And after installing the segmentation model, it will allow us to apply the object selection tool to our image. So what this object selection tool basically does is it automatically detects an object or any elements, and it allows us to select that particular object or element by one click or with one click. For example, I want to select this glasses here. So you can see that when I hover over the glasses, it is highlighting. So I can simply click and now it automatically makes a selection of the glasses. So this is what basically an object selection does. It makes our workflow very fast. And the next tool that we have is the selection brush tool. So the selection brush tool is basically like the quick selection tool in Photoshop. It allows us to simply brush over a portion and it makes a selection of that particular portion like so. And we can deselect the selection by holding down the command and clicking on the D key. The next tool that we have is the flood selection tool. So this particular flood selection tool is like a magic wand tool in Photoshop, where we can simply click and select, and it automatically detects the consistent colors or tone or consistent properties of an area inside an image, and it allows us to make the selection in that way. So I can simply go ahead and click on a area and it automatically detects that portion and it makes a selection. For example, in this image you can see that on the right we have skin tone colors. We can simply click on that portion and now you can see that the flood selection tool has worked its magic and made a selection of only the skin tones on the right. So this is how the flood selection tool basically works. And let me go ahead and make unselect the selection by holding down Command and D. And the next tool that we have is the rectangular marquee tool. So the rectangular marquee tool basically allows us to click and drag and make a selection through a rectangular shape marquee. So I can click and drag and then release to make a selection in this rectangular area. Similarly, the next one is the elliptical marquee tool, and the elliptical marquee tool also allows us to make the selection based on circle or ellipses. We can also go ahead and deselect by clicking on the subtract mode right here and then clicking and then holding down the shift to make the constraint and then removing the shift, and you can see that it has deselected the portion or subtracted the portion from our recent rectangular marquee selection. So let me go ahead and deselect the selection, and the next tool that we have is the column marquee tool. So what column marquee tool basically allows us to do is it selects according to the pixel in a column, or it selects a column by the number of pixels in the area of an image. For example, our width currently is 17 pixels. So what does this mean is it will make a selection of a column in an image by the width of 17 pixels. And if I make a selection or if I click on an image, then you can see here now that these 17 pixels have been selected and it is selecting the entire column with the width of 17 pixels. And similarly, we have the same concept here for the row selection as well, where we can click and it makes a selection. However, it is not selecting because our pixel is very small in value, so we can increase it. We can increase it and then we can simply click to make a selection. And you can see now that it has made the selection of row by 12 pixels. So the next selection tool that we have is the freehand selection tool. It's like a lasso tool in Photoshop. So we can simply click and draw to make a selection with this. So we can click on the image and we can draw it like so. And you can see that it has made the selection. So this is how it works. we can go ahead and click on Command D to deselect it. The next tool that we have is the Fill tool. So this is a really handy tool in Affinity, and where we can use it is we can use it in the scenario where we need to fill a particular area or an entire image. So that is when we use the Fill tool. While using Fill tool, we can also see that Affinity has many different types of fill. If we click here, then you can see we have solid fill, linear fill, elliptical fill, radial fill, conical fill, mesh fill, and more. Some of the fill are very new, and we should make our hands dirty and explore it. So basically, the fill tool simply allows us to fill an area. Let's create a new layer and let's apply the filter in this new area. If I click here, then you can see that nothing has happened and it has changed the layer. However, if I click and drag, you can see a gradient fill has been created in this particular new layer. Okay, so after the new gradient fill has been created, we can change different colors for it by going to the colors and then selecting a color and maybe clicking on the next point here and then again changing the color like this. We can also change the type, and we can change the type to solid color. As you can see, our color is now solid, or we can change it as an elliptical type, and you can see now that our fill is in elliptical type, and we can tweak the colors and change the colors as per our preference. Let's select an orange here for the center. Okay, so we can change the colors like so. So this is our fill tool, and it is a really handy and helpful tool because we'll be using it mostly, and we can also use this fill tool when we are applying or creating a new layer, which is the fill layer. And fill layer basically acts like a background layer, which is automatically locked, and it really separates our attention and allows us to focus on our work instead of focusing on the background. So this is how the fill tool works. So let me delete this layer. All right. So the next tool that we have is the flood fill tool. So flood fill tool basically is like the pen bucket tool. Let's create a new layer again, and we can choose a color. Let's choose, okay, green for now, and let's make sure that the pixel layer is selected, and we can click on this layer to fill in a solid color. So this is what the flood fill tool, yes, the flood fill tool does. It works like a pen bucket tool. Let me delete this pixel again and collapse the color panel. The next tool that we have is the pen brush tool. So this is the very, very good tool because we use it a lot while in layer mask and many more areas. Okay, so what does the brush tool do is it allows us to brush an area. For example, let me change the green color to foreground by picking on X, and then we can simply paint on this area. However, I don't want to paint on this particular image, so I'll undo it by holding down the command and clicking on Z. If you are on Windows, hold down the control and click on Z, and I'll create a new layer, and then I'll paint on the new layer like so. And you can see that the brush tool allows us to paint different colors to the brush. We can also change the color, by the way, and let's collapse the color panel and again brush it, and you can see that we can brush around our area like this, and we can also tweak different settings that we have above for brush tool, and we'll be exploring these settings more on our new videos. However, I want you to understand what the basic concept of brush tool is in this video. So the basic concept of brush tool is that it allows us to brush in a particular area on the image. We can also change the size. We can make the brush bigger. As you can see, it's big now, and we can brush it over like so. So let me go ahead and delete this layer. And the next tool that we have is paint mixer brush. So the paint mixer brush also has a lot of applications, and it can be used mostly by artists and painters. However, during editing image, we rarely use it, but it also has its applications. And one of the application I think was when fixing a very creased shirt and making the shirt more like doing an iron. So it also has its applications, and we can uh, implement it on this image, and it works like painting or smudging the colors, as you can see here. I think it looks a bit cool. Let me like increase the size here by clicking and dragging and making it a bit bigger, the brush. Okay, let me increase it more, and we can just click and drag, and you can see that it has given a different kind of effect. So this is what this particular brush tool does. It has its applications, but we should know, and we should like get used to it on where we can implement it. So I'll hold down Command key and press on Z to undo, and if you are on Windows, you can use the shortcut key of Control Z to undo. The next tool that we have is the color replacement tool. This particular color replacement tool is also rarely used, and it basically allows us to, I think, replace color as the name suggests. As you can see, it allows us to replace colors like so. And it also does have its settings on top. We'll look into more detail about the settings in later videos. For now, I'll simply undo the brush that we have applied. Alright, so this is our replacement tool. The next one is pixel tool. The pixel tool is kind of new tool, and I'm also really not clear about what this tool does. However, it allows us to draw. I think it modifies as per the pixel in an artwork, as you can see here. However, I'll click undo now. So the next tool that we have is the erase brush tool. So the erase brush tool has been well thought out in Affinity. That means if we need to erase an object, let's say, for example, if I want to erase this particular glasses from this image, I can simply click and erase it like this. And you can see that it has erased that glasses. But let's say that our image or layer type is not pixel, and our image type is image type. As you can see when hovering on the layers left icon, you can see the type of the layer. And let's say if I select the image of the cherry, and if I brush on the image by selecting the erase brush tool, let's say if I brush in here, now you can see that the best part of using the image erase brush tool in Affinity is that it automatically creates a layer mask when we apply the erase brush tool in an image type layer. So this one thing is good, and please be careful when applying the erase brush tool in a raster image which is this sunglasses image. And please also be careful about few tools, because some of the tools, they automatically change an image to a raster image. So please be careful about that. So the next tool that we have is background erase tool. So let's see what this background erase tool does. So the background image tool basically allows us to paint and remove or erase a background of an image. So as you can see here, we can simply paint, and then you can see that it has removed the blues around the sunglasses, and we can also paint here like so, and it has removed the the skin tone color around the sunglasses like so. So this is basically what the background erase tool does. So the next tool that we have is the flood erase tool. So flood erase tool is also like a background erase tool, but it's just like a paint bucket tool where we can remove the background by a click of a button like so. We can also remove the skin tones by clicking on the skin tone color like so. So this is how we can erase the background color with one click by the flood erase tool. The next tool that we have is the adjustment brush tool. I think the adjustment brush tool might come into handy more because let's select one, okay, not this one. Let's select an image. Okay, let's select the move tool and resize the image. Okay, let's say, okay, now after resizing the image, let's say we want to adjust the exposure of an image in a certain area. Then what the adjustment brush tool allows us to do is we can select the exposure type here as an adjustment that we want to apply, and we can simply click and adjust. However, you can see right now if we adjust or if we apply the adjustment brush tool, it will darken because by default the settings are low of the exposure. So this is the reason why it is darkening. However, after we darken this area, you can see a setting box appears below, and if we increase the settings, now we can simply adjust the exposure like so. As you can see, it has increased exposure in the forehead of the subject. So this is what the adjustment brush tool does. And we can also adjust the opacity. Now I think it looks a bit okay, bit good than previously. So if we click on before and after, you can see it has adjusted the exposure in the forehead a bit. So this is how the adjustment tool works, and there are a lot of adjustments that we can select like levels, white balance, brightness, contrast, curves, and more. And there are many new adjustments also that I can see in Affinity. So the next tool that we have is the burn brush tool. So what the burn brush tool basically does is it allows us to brush and darken the area of an image. For example, if I want to darken the area in an image and add a bit of dimension, like we need a shadow in this area, so maybe we can simply click and brush over that area, and you can see that the shadow has been applied and the area is a bit darker in that particular portion. So that is what the burn brush tool does. And the next thing is that the dodge brush tool. The next tool we have is the dodge brush tool, and the dodge brush tool is just opposite of the burn brush tool. Oops, sorry. I think I've selected the wrong layer. So let me delete the exposure adjustment layer first, and then select the subject layer, image layer again, and again go to burn brush tool. And the burn brush tool simply allows us to darken an area of an image, as you can see here. And we have the dodge brush tool as well. And as opposed to burn brush tool, the dodge brush tool allows us to lighten the area of an image. And this allows us to add dimension to our subject or any object in the image. And the next tool that we have is the sponge brush tool. Sponge brush tool is also for the sponge brush tool also falls under the same family. And this what sponge brush tool allows us to do is it allows us to saturate and desaturate a particular portion of an image. As you can see here, we can saturate or desaturate the color with the sponge brush tool. And if we need to desaturate, we can change the mode to desaturate, and then we can just paint. As you can see now, it has been desaturated, and we can use this sponge brush tool to create a kind of porcelain effect to different subjects in image. And we can use this sponge brush tool to apply different porcelain-like effect to the subject's skin tones in an image. So the next tool that we have is the filter brush tool. So the filter brush tool is kind of a very awesome kind of tool. Let me go ahead and let me turn on the sunglasses image. And what does the filter brush tool allows us to do is, it basically allows us to brush to an area, and now we can apply certain filters to that area. Right now you can see that the default filter is Gaussian blur. So if I apply the filter brush tool to the sunglasses, then it will blur that area where I paint on. So we can change different kind of filter here as well. Let's select glitch and let me simply paint here. Oops, sorry, I again selected the wrong layer. Let me go ahead and delete this layer mask. Okay, let me hide this image and click on the sunglasses layer again. And you can see here, as soon as I hover over the sunglasses, it's adding the glitch effect, as you can see on the live preview. And we can also select different kinds of filters right here. Let's apply the glitch filter. If we apply, just look at it, how awesome the sunglasses is looking right now. And you can also see that Affinity has automatically added a layer mask to that particular image. However, I'll undo it for now. And we have a lot of filters here in this particular filter library, like Gaussian blur, box blur, lens blur, and more. So the next tool that we have is the blur brush tool. As the name implies, the blur brush tool basically allows to blur the portion of an image like so. And the next tool that we have is I'll undo the blur that I have recently applied. The next tool we have is the sharpen brush tool. The sharpen brush tool allows us to sharpen an image or sharpen an object or anything in an image. Likewise, the next tool is median brush tool. The median brush tool also falls under the same family, and it also allows us to apply certain kind of effect. As you can see, it's blurring the noises. So yes, so the median brush tool allows us to get rid of the noises from an image. As you can see, there is certain level of texture in the background. So if I click and brush, then you can see that the noise in the texture have been removed. So this is basically what the median brush tool does. So let me go ahead and undo. Okay. Okay. All right. So we have reverted back our image to its original form. The next tool that we have is the smudge brush tool. The smudge brush tool also have its own applications, and it allows to basically smudge colors. And while we are compositing or working on an image, the smudge brush tool basically allows us to smudge colors, and we can also work with smudge brush tool while fixing the skin tones of a subject. And there's also one technique. While we are making a selection of a subject, we can use the smudge brush tool to adjust the selection and make the selection more precise and perfect. So smudge brush tool has also its own applications. However, in our case, for now, if we use the smudge brush tool, we can smudge the colors. As you can see, we can smudge the colors and the subject is looking a bit like in a motion blur. As you can see, this is how the smudge tool or the smudge brush tool can be used. Alright, I'll undo the smudge brush tool applied to the sunglasses. The next tool that we have is the clone brush tool. So the clone brush tool can be used in few images, like while removing the blemishes or correcting the image. Let me first of all select the current image of the subject, and maybe now you can see that there is certain blemishes right here at below her eyes. So what we can do is, with the clone stamp tool, we can simply take a sample from around and we can paint to those areas where we want to get rid of, and we can paint on those areas where we want to get rid of those blemishes. we can take a sample from neighboring areas with the clone stamp tool, and maybe we can enlarge the brush a bit and we can draw around to get rid of the blemishes on that particular area, like so. However, I'll undo the changes, and the next tool that we have is the undo brush tool. So as the name implies, it basically allows to undo our brush implementation. So right now I think it will not do anything because we haven't applied any brush tool on the skin. So, but however, I think the concept is that it will undo any application that we have made to an image using different brush tool. Okay, so the next tool that we have is in-painting brush tool. So let's see what does the in-painting brush tool do. Okay, so the in-painting brush tool works just like the remove tool in Photoshop, where we can simply brush over an area and it will automatically remove any negative artifacts from that area. Okay, let's see if I brush in this particular area. Okay, it's removing those portion. Similarly, if I brush over again, okay, now it has taken the sample from the wrong place and our eyebrows are above our forehead. So basically, yes. So this is what the in-painting brush tool does. It basically do the same function as an remove tool in Photoshop, which is to remove things or artifacts that we don't want from an image. So the next tool that we have is the healing brush tool. Let me undo the image first. Okay, so the next tool is the healing brush tool. So what does the healing brush tool is it simply allows us to get rid of blemishes, pimples, and other kind of dirt from the skin. Okay, so we can simply use it by taking the sample from an area and then painting on the particular area where it will take the sample from this area. As you can see the cross here in this portion. So the next tool that we have is the patch tool. The patch tool also can be used in the same way to remove different blemishes and fix skin texture and skin irregularities. So you can simply click and select a particular portion, and what it does is after leaving the mouse or after letting go of the mouse click, it allows us to sample from the portion that we want, and if we click on it, then it will apply those other areas to that particular selection, and it get rid of the artifacts that we had in the skin prior. So we can also adjust the skin sample that we have just taken, and I think it's really intuitive. So the next tool that we have is the blemish removal tool. So let me turn on or go to our next image. Let's select the image and let's increase the brush size. So what the blemish removal tool does is, I think it, as the name implies, it removes the blemishes. Just click on the area that we want to remove the blemishes from, and then just by clicking, just move your cursor, and now we can sample the area, and if we are satisfied with this particular area, we can simply remove it. And now we can see that that particular area has been applied to the area, and the blemishes are gone. Likewise, we have our next tool, which is red eye removal tool. So the red eye removal tool is not used often because in the cameras in the past, we used to face many problems of the red eye, but currently most of the cameras have already implemented very good algorithms. So the red eye is really not an issue in photos nowadays. So I'll skip the red eye removal tool for now. So the next tool that we have is the pen tool. So pen tool basically allows us to create different shapes or different forms in vector. Like we can click, 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 and make a shape like so. which is the closed shape, as we have already closed. We can also make any form of curved shapes and close the shape like this, as you can see here. And the pen tool has its own way of using, and we need a lot of practice to get used to pen tool. But eventually, after we get a hands-on practice with the pen tool will be really easy to use. So let's move on to the next tool for now, which is the node tool. So as the name implies, the node tool basically allows us to adjust the node or points from different vector shapes, like so. We can adjust or tweak the nodes. We can change the anchor points, like so. We can change the direction of the anchor points. We can also break the anchor points and change the type of the anchor point to point type, or we can again click by holding down the option key and change the type of the anchor point to curvy type. So this is what the node tool allows us to do. So for now, I'll get rid of these shapes created by the pen tool through the layers panel and delete the shapes. The next tool that we have is the shape tool. So here we can see there are a lot of shape tools. And one of my favorite shape right now is the square star tool. So I'll click on the square star tool and I can select a color, let's say green, and I can click and drag to create a shape. I can also adjust different kind of properties on top here. As you can see that I can change the fill color, I can change the stroke color, maybe I can set the stroke color to blue, I can change the stroke width, I'll set it to 5. I can also make more changes to stroke width in this particular box. And there are a lot of other settings as well where we can change sides. As you can see, we can add more sides. However, the default is 5, so I'll leave it as 5. Other is cutout, and there are many more settings. And the shape tool works in the similar way for all the tools that you can see right here. So I'll remove this particular shape which is created. So I'll collapse the color panel, and right now again we are in the layers panel. So the next tool that we have is the artistic text tool. So what this tool allows us to do is, it's just like the point type tool, which allows us to type in a single line. And if we want to type something, we can simply click on the image and maybe we can type something here. And as you can see, it's a single line type tool. So we can also change the size of the text by clicking and dragging to the points, or we can simply add a value here to change the size of the text, like so. There are also other settings above where we can change the font, we can change the font style, and many more. And we can also access the font or the character box by clicking here, and you can see there are a lot of settings to change the character settings from this particular box. However, I will close this box for now. And the next tool that we have is the film text tool. So let me go ahead and delete this particular tool. So the next tool is film text tool. If you go here, then you can see that there is a tool called film text tool. Select the film text tool and click and drag. And now you can see that we can add different paragraphs to this particular area. Right click, and then we can add different kind of filler text. And you can see that the filler text has been added. So the frame text tool is like the paragraph text tool, where we can simply click and drag and add different paragraphs of text. If we want to get rid of this particular blue line, we can go to view, navigate to show, and then click on text flow. And now you can see that the blue lines have been automatically made invisible. So let me get rid of this particular text. So the next tool that we have is the color picker tool. As the name implies, the color picker tool allows us to pick the color. So let me unhide this particular image and again make the sunglasses image visible. And the color picker tool basically allows us to pick colors, and you can see after clicking and picking the colors, it has automatically sampled that color, and we can see the color here in the foreground fill right here. And the next tool that we have is the style picker tool. So the style picker tool basically allows us to sample and pick a style of a particular text, objects, or any graphic element. Let's say the particular object has a particular fill and particular stroke applied to it, and the style picker tool basically allows or basically samples the style, appearance, and the fill, color, as well as all the styles from that particular objects. So the next tool that we have is the hand tool. The hand tool allows us to move around the document and navigate around the document like so. The last and the final tool is the zoom tool, where we can simply click and scrub to zoom in and click and scrub to zoom out. And this is what the zoom tool does. And the last thing in the toolbar is the foreground and the background color. So this is all about the tools in the Pixel Studio in Affinity. If you find this video helpful, please press the like button, and to get more tips and tricks about Affinity in future, press or hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching this video and see you on the next video.